Ladies and gentlemen, we've got an update here today. I've talked about it a few different times. The potential stimulus check, rebate, whatever you want to call it. They're calling it, I think Trump called it a dividend. We're learning more about it with Scott Bessent saying the $2,000 tariff checks will be going to, they say, families making less than 100K. Now, it's not known exactly, is it everyone? Is it just like a family by family basis? But they say families under 100K. Is that like combined income of a household? How does that work exactly? But when you look at the numbers do align, especially if they're able to make around 350, maybe 400. I don't think they're going to make 400, but like 300 to 350 billion in tariffs annually. These payouts, if it's everyone under 100,000, $2,000, I believe are around 250 billion. So if you're making 300 billion, you pay out 250 billion, you've got 50 billion left over. That's where Trump references the rest of the money going to paying down the debt. Now, ideally, based on how big our debt is, we would love the full 250 or 300 billion to fully pay down the debt with all of it, with 100% of the tariff revenue. But in terms of the midterms, in terms of upcoming elections, Trump is doing this, and you can see this is the admin's game plan moving forward. It is important if you do want voters to see that the tariffs are having a positive impact. And this is where the arguments come into play, because what they'll say, well, you're just paying it back because the prices were raised because of the tariffs in the first place. Well, no, they've done calculations, and if you look at the numbers, and this is just like on average, it's cost Americans, they say, and honestly, I don't even agree with these numbers because I don't think we've seen this much inflation. And if these people want to argue about inflation, it's 3% inflation. Under Biden, we had 9.1% and an average of like over 5% inflation. Or at least average over 3%, because right now it's 3.1 and they're saying it's this terrible inflation. Under Biden, it was far worse. And you want to say it's because of COVID. I mean, yeah, that was a big impact, but they still printed a bunch of money and caused heavy inflation. By the way, this is not even printing money. What Trump is doing, it's a reallocation. But they'll say, well, you're just getting your money back because every business had to raise their prices because of the tariffs. They've done calculations. It costs consumers an extra $600, they say. I don't know if it's annually or what it is. And you'd be getting back $2,000. So 600 versus 2,000, it's not 2,000 versus 2,000 like they'll try and swing it if these checks go through. By the way, I really don't agree with that $600 number anyways, because I don't think it costs an average American $600. It depends what type of goods you buy, because some things in terms of the tariffs, it's going to be more impactful and cause the price of that good to go up, and other things are not going to be impacted at all. So it's like, it really depends the stuff you're purchasing. But, if they go through with these checks, you are going to have to do the actual check. You can't do the tax break, or because people are not going to view it as much of an impact. So they're going to have to do something like that to where it should be a check. If the sole goal is to show people the tariffs and what it's doing, this could also be a way in which I know the Supreme Court ruling is happening, or the hearings are happening. This could be a way to try and entice the Supreme Court to rule in Trump's favor with the timing of this. Although, to be fair, they've been talking about this for 4 or 5 months now, maybe even longer, in terms of these tariff checks because of the revenue that they can generate. But you also do have that as well. The Supreme Court possibly ruling that Trump cannot unilaterally enact these tariffs, which Trump would have to go back to Congress. And I believe a lot of the tariffs would remain, but it would be like a holding period to where it would be a big problem. And I think it would be a negative look for the administration because it is a Republican Supreme Court. Will that really impact the tariffs in the long run? Maybe not, but it would be something that you'd have to defend with the Republican Supreme Court ruling against Trump. So, and by the way, I saw there was a pretty good chance that they will rule against Trump. We'll have to see. But you also have that looming as well. And you can see Trump says the United States will boom in the next 5 to 6 months. And of course, he's going to say that. I do think, these checks, we'll see the timeline of it. But if you do have the $2,000 checks, that's disposable income for people. You've got the rate cuts that are really going to start having an impact, the lower interest rates. You do have the stock market in a relatively good place. We'll see with crypto, Bitcoin back under 100K, but that's micro price action. It still is, we would hope, at least got a few legs left in it up to around 150, 175K. The cycle Although I think the hope is waning with a lot of people on that. But I do think the economy is set up to be in a much better place by midsummer next year. Just looking at now in terms of things like inflation, that's where it gets a little bit dicey, especially if you give people $2,000. Now, it is a reallocation. They're not printing more money, so the impact's going to be less than something like a COVID stimulus check. But you are going to undoubtedly have at least a extra layer of inflation, not a 9.1% core inflation rate, but we have this 3.1%, and we are lucky in terms of what's happened with crude oil and gas prices being as low as they've had, and the truflation down at around 2.3, 2.4%, maybe even lower than that. I haven't checked it recently, but it's been cooperating nicely. And so if you're able to keep the crude oil down, that stays down, I mean, that's a lot of geopolitical stuff there. Trump really can't control the exact price of it, but if you can have some luck and that stays down, and you have all these other things happening, you have this $2,000 stimulus, this is a big impact in terms of having a positive effect for the midterm races. And I know it's going to be a big issue, and Trump understands what happened back in 2018 when the midterms were a disaster and the Democrats got power within Congress. It's going to be immediate articles of impeachment. They get the House back, and that's just the reality of it. Now, what will it be for? Well, we can just speculate on it, but something like abuse of power, maybe using the office in a way in which he shouldn't be, in terms of some, there's some crypto stuff I know that could be problematic for Trump. But obviously, it's all an effort to just bog down. As long as the Senate stays Republican, he won't officially be removed from office or anything like that. But if they do take the House back, you are going to be dealing with a lot of issues that we'd rather just allow Trump to govern. And what happened in 2019, 2020 with the impeachments, it does become an issue. So we will see. I know they're definitely putting a high emphasis on that. We also got the Epstein stuff. So there's more. There's more of these emails that have been released. From what I saw, there were some troubling emails from Epstein. Really, nothing that was overly incriminating against Trump. What the Democrats seemingly did is they redacted a bunch of stuff that had already been released. By the way, it's kind of funny because that's the exact same thing the Republicans did when they released the Epstein files Phase 1. They redacted a bunch of stuff that was already revealed. And so they did that, and then they said, well, there's this mystery victim who apparently is Virginia Giuffre, who has already exonerated Trump of any wrongdoing. So it's like, we're going to keep this mystery victim, but it turns out it's Virginia Giuffre who said, no, Trump's innocent, he didn't do anything. And of course, I mean, are we going to do this? It's like Groundhog Day. People, everyone wants to talk about this. Okay, we're going to talk about it again, where Trump has ran in 3 different presidential elections, so he's been vetted 3 different times, and especially in 2024, when it was obvious Trump was going to be the Republican nominee, he becomes the Republican nominee. Then he's leading Kamala in all the betting markets and in the polls, and the Democrats control the executive branch, but they're not going to give even a simple October surprise against Trump if he's so evil and involved with Epstein in this horrible, heinous way. And there's not going to be a single thing because they're worried that Bill Clinton is also going to go down. I find that extremely hard to believe. It's not believable. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous. But now suddenly Trump gets in. And I think it is true that they've handled the Epstein stuff horribly, and so it gives the Democrats an in. People have to understand with Epstein, the Democrats were always on the run, and Trump was kind of timid. The base was really supportive. Fox News would ask Trump, well, are you going to release the Epstein stuff? And it was never like emphatically yes, like with the JFK stuff and other things. And so, whether or not you think, well, because a lot of people are still alive, some of Trump's friends might be involved in some way, what do the files really entail? And then the whole idea with Musk coming out and saying, well, Trump's in the files. Well, what does that even mean? The files it's a massive amount of information. Yes, Trump did have a relationship with Epstein. That doesn't mean that he's guilty just because he's in the files. People think the files are just every guilty person's name listed. That's not how it works. So, look, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with it, but it's just the same thing over and over again. And it's just funny how they hated talking about Epstein. They called it a farce. They called it, and I don't think Trump has done a good job. I don't think you should call it a hoax. That is terrible wording. And I know he's saying, well, it's a hoax in terms of the Democrats and the way they're swinging it. But when you call the Epstein thing a hoax, like people think you're trying to like smooth it over and say, well, Epstein did nothing. His partner did nothing. Like, obviously, it was a very bad situation, and some young women and young girls got abused. So that type of verbiage is really not going to be helpful to your cause when you say it like that. And I understand you could say, well, the Democrats are trying to manipulate the situation like they did with the Russia gate, and it's more of like an information war to where they try and muddy the waters. But understand the facts. They're the ones that called the Epstein stuff a conspiracy when all anyone talked about was Bill Clinton and some of the others, and there were really, no Republicans rumored. And they called it a conspiracy. And that's when they had control of the executive branch. Could you believe that? Like, how incompetent is the Biden administration if these Democrats now are going to say, well, Trump's actually was significantly involved in Epstein? And the entire narrative when the Biden administration had control was, we're going to scoot it under the rug. It looks really bad for Democrats, and Republicans are the ones trying to push it and find some sort of semblance of truth when it comes to what U.S. government officials were involved in Epstein. So we'll have to see what ends up happening with it. I mean, obviously, there's some relationship that Trump had with Epstein, yes, but it's inconceivable to think that, and remember, going back to 2015, Trump's first presidential campaign, he brought up Epstein and talked about Bill Clinton. So if Trump really is guilty, that's a very stupid thing to bring the Epstein thing into the spotlight. If you were guilty of heinous crimes, like throwing stones from a glass house, it just doesn't make sense for Trump to do that. So if you understand these things and contextualize them, it would just be shocking. Now, are there people within the government that maybe are involved that could disrupt things, and so Trump doesn't want to release it? Because the thing is, this is the other thing you have to understand. People say, well, now Trump has done a 180. He really has not done a 180. Whenever they would ask him about Epstein, he would always be very coy, and then he'd be like, yeah, okay, we'll do it. It's never been like Trump's been emphatically about, at least from what I can see, especially when he was president-elect, emphatically about releasing everything. And it's just such a shame because they had such control of this narrative of Epstein, and they've completely botched it. The administration has. I would agree 100%. But it's like, listen, we'll see what ends up coming with these emails, and the situation is not going to go away with Epstein. There's gonna have to be something. I mean, I know they released some stuff, and they were trying to interview Maxwell, and she got transferred to like a cushy prison because she was cooperating. But it's been totally mishandled. You had the complete narrative going in, and this is the result now because Trump has decided to use the tagline that it's a hoax. And I get he's talking about, well, the Democrats' version of it and trying to link Trump to Epstein, that being a hoax, but it just doesn't sound good. It doesn't come off good. It comes off like you're trying to cover for yourself. And so, yeah, that's basically what I think. We'll have to see. It's hard to really say because they keep releasing stuff every few months. Then the Democrats want to release emails. Then there's a Republican saying we should release everything. And again, it's just inconceivable that Trump would be involved like this and make it survive 3 different vetting processes as the Republican nominee, especially in 2024 when the Democrats obviously hate Trump. They think he's the worst person. I mean, because what does that insinuate? If they say, well, we can't out Trump for these heinous crimes that would completely disqualify him from ever being elected because we have like 10 or 20 Democrats involved in Epstein Island as well. Like, what does that even say? I mean, it sounds just, it doesn't seem realistic. I mean, maybe people think, well, yes, this is how the government is and it's that horrible, but I mean, you would think they would at least hit Trump with, I mean, even some of these emails that have leaked. Why would the Democrats not use these emails in the context of like an October surprise? So I guess we'll have to see what ends up happening here. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.